olarak 2005 yılından beri sürekli tekrar ettiğimiz ve inandığımız bir şey var. O da aydınlatma tasarımı bir değerdir. Ve aydınlatma tasarımcıları bu değeri hayatımıza, projelere, şehirlere, yaşadığımız alanlara taşıyan profesyoneller. Bugün belki de geçmişe göre yeni şeyler söylemenin en fazla ihtiyacımız olduğu dönem. Mühendislik hesaplarından, pafta üzerindeki yuvarlaklardan, tamamen işlev, fonksiyon üzerinden tanımlanmış aydınlatma projelerinden çıkıp biraz daha insan hayatına, yaşam kalitesine katkıda bulunan aydınlatma tasarımı yapılmış projelere yönlenmemiz gereken bir dönemi yaşıyoruz. Bugün burada olarak bu kavramlara inanan ya da inanacak ya da daha sıcak olan insanlar olduğunuzu düşünüyorum. Yeni şeyler söylemek için yeni bakış açılarına ihtiyacımız var. Bugün ışığın sağlıkla, psikolojiyle, sosyolojik background'la, kültürle ne kadar ilişkili olduğu sürekli yeni araştırmalarla ortaya çıkıyor. Bu yüzden esasında çok basit anlamda ışık sadece ışık değil. Siz algınızı, yaşam şartlarınızı oluşturan kavram. Bu yüzden de dinle beraber bu konuşmanın başlığını konuşurken işlevselliğin ötesinde aydınlatma tasarımı bence şu anlattığım kısa 3 cümlelik konuya çok uyuyor. Bugün inşallah dinin sunumuyla tüm bu kavramlara biraz daha farklı bir pencereden bakma şansınız olacak. Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Tekrar geldiğiniz için çok keyifli bir sunum olduğunu ben gördüm. Sizler de aynı şekilde keyif alacaksınız. Din Skira.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Paolo. Thank you very much for the young. Thank you very much for the invitation. I am very impressed by the crowd, and I hope that my lecture is going to be up to your interest. The reason why you see this picture here on the screen is because I want to show you where I come from. I want to show you what I do. The second best and second most interesting thing in my life for the quarter of the century has been lighting, and the third one has been living on the sea and sailing. And this is me here, so that you think that I just do lighting all the time. But coming to our topic is I like to use the sentence from Louis Kahn, which is one of my favorite architects, and not just because what he does and what he actually did, but also about his poetry about lighting and his special, very specific understanding about lighting. But before I start my actual presentation, I want to show you something that I think you will find very, very interesting.
Itong lugar namin, Sitio Maligados, San Vicente, San Pedro Laguna.
Siyempre, alam mo naman, ganitong lugar, squatter area, tabing release, dikit-dikit ang bahay.
Madilim talaga dito sa lugar ko na to.
Wala kami dito sa loob, lagi kami sa labas.
Nadadapa kasi madilim, yung dadaanan, hindi mo alam, may nakaharang. Tutulog na lang ako, lailaw eh.
Ang tawag niya sa akin dito si Mang Dimi Solar. Napaliwanag ko yung mga bahay nila magdilim. Bubutas ka ng yero, lalagay mo yung bote, lagyan mo siya ng isilan, bago lagyan mo siya ng tubig na mineral, lalagyan ng sundrops. Bago kabit mo sa bahay, lagyan isilan to para hindi tumulo. Ganyan lang kasimple yun. Dati yung ganito, ito kadilim nung bago pagkapitan. Ngayon, nung kapitan ko na, ito na ang liwanag niya. Yan ang liwanag.
Pumilit po ako kasi bote lang, tubig. Naliwanag na yung bahay mo.
Bumaba yung ano ko, binayaran ko ngayon. Simula lang makapitan ako dito. At saka itong solar bottle bulb na to, hindi mainit.
Dahil sa buti na yan, sa solar na buti na yan, bumanda ang araw namin.
Ang nalagyan na namin ito ay bali 643. Gusto na namin tuloy-tuloy para marami nga matulong mga tao rin na yung maliwanagan mga bahay nila madilim.
Parang katulad na rin ng bumbilya. Dati natin nakakalimutan at pakinabangan na ngayon.
Well, I'm not going to say anything more about this, but if we want to say how important light is and the light harvesting, I think the video speaks for itself. This is what my colleagues from US have written recently, and this is the domains and practices for architectural lighting designers. And basically, everything that we do as a lighting designers is in these few words in here. And everything about them is very nice and it's very good, except one thing. I personally disagree that the human experience and the design of lighting that positively affects people should be on the last place. I think that that should be on the first place and on the top of these domains. Because, you know, everything about lighting is about the human experience value. We know that, you know, we react biologically to lighting. We react, it's a visual experience, it's an emotional experience. And if we put all these three important things together, it is a human experience value that actually brings them all and explains the importance of lighting and what is it that we do. So the design added value in the lighting industry and in the lighting design process is very nicely explained in a different way by the book from Juhani Palasma that talks about the eye of the skin. And in this book that I found, it's very peculiar and very nice that he actually explains how the human body reacts to the light, not just through the eyes, but actually throughout the entire body. So, to begin my actual story here, at the beginning I will show you a methodology of a holistic approach towards lighting design. I am now actually speaking mostly to architects and interior designers, and I will try to explain that this methodology is actually very simple if we're looking at it from the human and everyday use point of view. And we came up with the 5 points for sustainable and adaptive lighting design strategy, which takes into account the interior space, but not only interior space which we are doing, but also the exterior space which is right next to it. And then also that exterior space versus the surrounding that is around that space. What does that mean? In a simple manner to explain that is, let's say that we are doing our home or a private house. We're not going to talk about the large projects, big projects, but this is also important for all of them. When we do our interior lighting, it's very important how this lighting is going to affect the exterior in which we live, our terrace or a garden. Also, that same garden is also going to influence with its lighting our interior space. But our garden is also influencing our neighbor's property. So when we do a lighting design, a good lighting strategy is the one that takes this holistic approach and takes all these things into account, not just the single one that we are doing. So in between all these spaces, there is something that we call a secret space, which is actually a new typology of architecture, we can call it like that, which is only created by light. And that is a topic for itself that we can talk some other time. In order to understand this, and from the very beginning of the lighting project, we created an operational light design diagram which talks about a typology of architecture that is present in the project, talks about new typologies which are created by light, and talks about the connective tissue, which is the roads and streets and so on, the communication between all this. And here, as you can see, there is a neighbor relation, object contours, landscape relation, and atmospheric effect for each of these different typologies. So we are at the very beginning, at the first stage of our design process, we are actually defining the influence of the light between each of these objects. We are defining how is the contour of that object going to look like. Do we want it to be very bright? Do we want it to be crisp? Do we want it to be blurred or semi-blurred? Do we want the atmospheric effect to be rural or urban? Or is it the neighbor relation private? Is it semi-private? Is it transparent? This is something that we have to define in a very early stage of the design process. And then we have to understand that lighting today cannot longer be viewed as a lighting fixture by itself or one room separate. We have to look at the lighting system as a dynamic grid, which is what it is. It's a dynamic grid because of all the things that I said before, where everything influences each other. So that dynamic grid is actually working on certain conditions. That's why we have to use something that we call a conditional logic. What does that mean in a simple words? It means that we go back to our house that we had before we lit it. So the condition is that I want to watch TV now, or I want to read, or I want to, I don't know, have a dinner. So before, we used to think in a matter of pressing the switch that turns on the light over the table, or pressing the switch that turns on the table lamp. Today, we no longer think that way. We think of lighting as a grid, and the condition is, I want to read. So I press one button that creates a scene and adjusts all the lighting in that room for reading. But at the same time, I have a terrace which is lit outside, or I have my beautiful garden, and I want to relax. The next scene I want to provide to myself is that the outside light is coming through my windows inside my living room, and that provides a very nice shadowy light for my relaxation. So this is one example where one influences the other. And through this analysis, we created the anatomy of nocturnal visual experience through which we can actually create the topography of light on any given space that we are encountering. So through this process, we need to ask ourselves, what is the lighting design actually? You know, is it science? Is it art? What is it? It's actually both. You know, too many people think about lighting in a utilitarian way. Utilitarian meaning that we just need a certain quantity of light in a given space to provide its a primary function. But it's really not like that. There is so much more about lighting design than just that. You know, if we try to find words, you know, the language that we use in lighting, you know, we have all these different words that are very present, as Emre said before. You know, some we can separate and say, well, this is more art or this is more science, but they are actually all intertwined with each other and they're all communicating with each other. But, you know, for us to understand the language of light, it is actually a very simple one, but on the other hand, it's not so easy to write lighting language on a paper like it is for the musician. You know, the musician, he writes his notes, and everybody who knows to read those notes can replay that music. In lighting, it's not really like that. You know, we have a long process until the lighting design project is over. And that's because, you know, we cannot, it's a very, you know, I would say personal and too many times very creative and personal approach in which the lighting designer himself needs to be present at the very end of the installation of the project to focus the lighting and to program the lighting. And that is one connection which goes back to before about the dynamic grid and scenes and so on and conditional logics and so on. On the other hand, it's very simple. Sorry. When we talk about lighting on the outdoors, you know, we all go outside on the Sundays, you know, when we're free and there's a beautiful day, and we can very easily distinguish and talk about lighting when it comes to a natural light. But then, when it comes to electric light, then we all think we have difficulty talking about it, but it's actually very simple because even little kids can talk about lighting when you talk about sun, when you talk about the effects on sun and shadows and cold and so on. And then, throughout this language and what we learn, we actually come back to our homes or our offices where the lighting is, in too many occasions, very bad. That's why I think that lighting should be considered something else than this. You know, then we start making a mess in our urban surroundings. And I think that nature is the one that speaks very silently about lighting, but we hear it very loud. On the opposite, we have to speak very loudly about lighting to be heard. And I think nature is the best teacher of all. We just have to learn to see it, and we have to learn how to see the light. But there is another thing that is a paradox about light, and I think that everybody should understand that, and that is understanding form. The form of the light, and when I talk about it, it sounds strange because we can't see light. Light is invisible. So how can it have a form? But it does. The form of the source that comes out of the fixture or the source, it's one. Then the form of the light itself, which reveals all the forms that we see around us, and then creates another one we call shadow. So when we talk about light, we need to consider 4 different forms and how each other are influencing the space and how each of these forms are influencing our feeling and our sense of the space. An example that I have here is very simple. You see, the form of this light here is very linear and very diffused. The form of this light here is very narrow and spotty. So if we would have this form of light on this sculpture here, this sculpture will no longer look like that. You will not be able to see the detail, the shadows, and everything that you see on it. Same with here. You know, we can't use the same form of light on this painting that we can use on this sculpture here. So the form of the light is something that is also crucial at the very early stage when we are trying to find and specify the product that we will use for the particular use. But we can expand that vision to an entire building. So if we want to create an impression, a visual expression, if we want to create that wow effect throughout some kind of building, we can also think in a sense of the form of the light that will follow this architecture, and that will bring us to an interest of enjoying that space in which we are living, because architecture is a given. A light should be integrated within this architecture, and light should follow the architecture itself. So understanding integration in that case is important synergy between architects, lighting designers, and interior designers. Because if we know all these, all the facts that I was talking about before, and we come to a meeting with an architect, you know, this is where this synergy comes to life. If we want to do a good integration, this is what matters. It's the synergy. Because understanding form, understanding light, and understanding integration, which in my opinion, integration is a word that maybe should be changed pretty soon, because I think it's not really the exact word, even though it's very popular and we use it a lot. But, you know, if you look at it, you know, we have a source of light. This is a point source. And even if we have a linear light or we have an indirect light, that light is always, for our eye, the brightest point in the space. So we can try to integrate that as much as we can, but the real integration would be the one where the architecture itself becomes the source. But if the architecture itself becomes the source, we lose the sense of space because there is no shadow. So shadow is as important as the light itself. This is a project we did with Iguzzini for the Salone Milano this year, which talks exactly about this philosophy. It is the object, it's a pavilion that we designed where we try to explain the importance of connecting objects with light. This object here is living within an object in here, and it's connected with something that it's not tangible, and that is light. So in this picture here, you cannot really distinguish what is the solid object and what is the intangible object, which is light. And that is the integration process that I was talking about before. So having this in mind, you know, and leaving the word integration as is, you know, we don't have to go through the artistic process or philosophical discussion about that. We can also use that philosophy, we can use those principles in a simple office, you know. We don't have to have too many visible fixtures that are put on the building. They can all be integrated within and provide the effects and provide the cleanness and pureness of the architecture that we want to achieve. So total integration fits very well within the total design. Sometimes this word integration, you know, before it comes something that, you know, I called integration with inspiration. And, you know, I really like this guy, Stanley Mason, who said that people who live their lives without being curious means they've made up their minds about everything. And that's true. What I'm trying to say about this is that sometimes, you know, it takes courage. You all know that because you are creative people and you have this creative process happening to you in office every time somebody orders the job. And you know how that process works. And you know that sometimes, you know, not sometimes, but always you need some kind of inspiration. So I'm going to show you the project that just won the first prize in Venice for a lighting design. And this is a public space which has about 100 square meters reception. And this is a typical lighting project that we do, but this is what I want to talk about today. So when I was thinking about, you know, how to integrate lighting, day lighting, sprinklers, audio, video, air conditioning, all these elements that every building today needs to have, you know, too many times and too many often are overlooked. And at the end, you know, you see them all. They become more important than the form of the architecture or the space itself. So I was thinking about that, and I looked at what the aliens were designing in the crops in UK. So that was my inspiration. We started to study how a form like this would fit into this building, and we came up with this form here. This form that actually integrated the lighting, the electric lighting, day lighting, sprinklers, air conditioning, everything. And this is just a lighting part of that part. We designed also the sections and everything for that ceiling. And we proposed this to the architect. We studied the different levels and the heights of that ceiling. And we used a very sophisticated control system that makes that lighting dynamic, that's easily to control and talks to daylight and so on and so on. So we can talk about green building, and this is the final result. So we ended up building this ceiling, and everything was integrated in it, and as you see it, it is a solid form. It is a solid form that looks like an artistic intervention in the space, but it actually contains all the technology within. And this is the view from below. You see these are LED fixtures here. We have indirect lighting around. We have daylight here. This is actually daylight. We have air conditioning ducts that are blowing from the side so you don't see them. And this is the view from the outside. Another project that is, I think, very interesting, I think you have it on the presentation of this event here, is that Novamed Clinic, and that is the medical institution in Zagreb. And I was talking to an architect and the owner and interior designer and so on, and you know, they asked us to design this lighting and, you know, the usual thing. And I came up with an idea, and I proposed. I says, you know, why do we have to have the same usual setup in a medical institution? Why is that a norm? Is that a norm? No, it's not. The only thing that it's a norm is the quantity of light. Everything else is up to us. So we said, okay, people come into the medical institution because they're sick. And when they come in, everything around them talks about their sickness. You know, the smell, the green color, the Armstrong ceiling, you know, the 60 by 60 fixtures. Everything is same in every hospital everywhere. This is not a hospital, this is just a clinic. But why don't we do something different? So I was thinking about it, and I thought about the brain cells, which are very much connected with everything that I'm talking about today. And we came up with this form, which we pulled from the entrance and all the way through a waiting area and the reception area. And we designed this ceiling, and the architect liked it, everybody liked it, and you know, the investor had enough courage to say, okay, let's do it. So these are the photographs of the actually realized the system. You can see the air conditioning here, and the audio here, and some other lights, and so on. So we tried to integrate all the system here that we could, but we couldn't because it's a very specific form. And this is another project that won an award in the United States a few years ago. Integration with inspiration talks through this project also, because we had a very specific case of this architectural meander that is here, connecting 3 restaurants through the terrace. This is a very beautiful 5-star tourist resort, and we were asked to do the lighting for these terraces. So we have 3 different interior designs. We have 3 different setups. We have a Japanese restaurant, French restaurant, and I don't know, somebody's restaurant, maybe Italian. And you know, the ceiling that connects all of them and goes out as cantilever through the terrace, you know, we said, why would we go with the usual setup and say, you know, put the point sources and so on? Why don't we do something different? So we made a connection throughout the ceiling and everything with stealing the idea from the veins of the fig leaf, and we reproduced that in the ceiling that you see up here. And we only lit the big veins, hidden all the other spots inside, and this is the final result. The other one in the same resort is that we had a very particular problem, and that is a huge ceiling, which is about a huge window, which is about 7 meters high, facing south. So during the day, we have a very strong influence of daylight in this area, but we have a completely dark area, which is a reception area up here. So what we did is we created this grid in the ceiling in which we integrated many different lighting fixtures with many different color temperatures and power. We had indirect light, we have downlights with different optics, and we created the possibilities so that this space can be controlled. You see, this is a detail, so you can't see much. But this was we allowed the client to adjust the lighting according to the condition. So that conditional logic was very present in this project here, which is the influence of daylight. So if there is a very strong daylight, then we turn on the lights in the north side to maximum. And then as the sun progresses and going down, we would then dimming the lights, which is almost the opposite of what somebody would expect. So this way we balance this light system in that area. Another one is that difficult project was that we have a very long 100 meters corridors from which people would go from the hotel to the wellness center. And you can imagine that you are going, you know, very comfortable in your robe from your room, walking 100 meters to the wellness center, and you know, sometimes it can become very boring. So this corridor, what we did was that we used, you know, we concealed the light within the niches, within these linear niches here. We made them randomly different, and then we made them randomly change color, so that as you are walking through this very long corridor, the scene of that corridor is actually constantly different for you. When we spoke to the architect, he also agreed that the windows will also follow the angle and the line of these niches of light. Another project that talks about integration with inspiration is the Kempinski Resort and a golf resort. This is a VIP restaurant in which there is a very specific architectural detail that followed this space, and that is that the supporting columns are not parallel to any walls, and they are very strong in that space. So if we went and tried to design this restaurant, you know, in a typical way of using pendants and downlights and so on, anything that we put on that ceiling that is below the ceiling would actually, in a way, fight with those strong columns that are supporting the entire ceiling. So what I did was we took the golf ball, we scanned the tip of it, and then we reproduced the form of the tip of a golf ball throughout the ceiling, so that entire ceiling became actually a lighting fixture. And we integrated all these different kinds of lights in there, and this is the result that we had. So another small project that we did in Casablanca is where we used a carpet on the ceiling, and we made the carpet become a lighting fixture. Then this is a project in Canada for which we are working right now, and this company is actually manufacturing electronic components. So we reproduced an electronic component in the ceiling to become a specific feature in that building when they are accessing, their guests and so on. So the guest will automatically know that this is, the company that deals with that electronics, and this is what they have. One of the projects that's never been realized, and it will never be realized, but I like to show it because I think it fits very well in the story about the integration with inspiration, is the Four Seasons Hotel we did in Baku. And, we had, the usual setup and the usual request from the client, and normally it's to illuminate the facade and illuminate the entrance and so on. I'm sorry. So instead of doing the usual setup of the facade, we proposed that why don't we use an Azerbaijani carpet, for which they're very famous, and try to reproduce the image of that carpet, or at least a part of the pattern of that carpet on the facade. Because I don't know if you've seen Baku, but most of the facades in Baku are pretty much illuminated the same. You can see those facades illuminated like that in Paris, in many cities throughout the world, and we just wanted to do something different. Well, this was our proposal, which was not accepted by the client because of the difficulty and so on. And then we also proposed that instead of having a typical, lanterns at the entrance, which you would expect in that kind of hotel, why don't we reproduce that carpet on the floor? So, the car enters here, stops here, the customer comes out, walks around. So why don't we provide a possibility for that customer to actually drive or walk through the carpet of light? For that matter, we designed a special fixture. We proposed this to a customer. The architects love it, the designers love it, but the client didn't like it because, it's too expensive and so on. So this is the fixture that was specifically designed for that, but this is a lunap that I designed a few years ago, and it's been manufactured by Iguzzini. And that is a very clear example of when the form of the light follows the form of the object it illuminates. So this goes back to the story which I told you before, that light has a form. And in too many occasions, if you put a regular downlight, the form of the light will actually deform the form of the object it illuminates. Also, the glare from the typical uplight fixture is, very much visible at night, especially because we cannot avoid having a glass on top of these fixtures being, dirty by the rain or dirt or whatever. And as you have this very slight film of dirt on it, it becomes very glary. This fixture is the opposite of that. It's a very small source. It has a black glass, so you don't have a big surface that it's actually glary. So that is another benefit of that fixture that we designed, and these are some samples of how do we use it. You can also create some different forms connecting it and so on. But it looks simple, but it's not that simple. What Mr. Guzzini was talking about before, it takes a very high technology in order today to design, to build, and to operate LED technology and LED fixtures. So if you look at the picture before, it looks very simple, but when you take it apart, it took, many working hours, engineers, in order to build a fixture like that would provide us with the function that we wanted. And You know, we were awarded in many different countries for that picture, and I'm very proud of it. When we talk about light for art's sake, this is how I call it, you know, it becomes a very difficult job. I have to say that one of the most difficult jobs I had recently was the Biennale of Venezia, Italian pavilion, dealing with artists. Thank you very much. Very difficult, because every single one of them has this very specific request, and they are very difficult to deal with. But at the end, everybody was happy, and this is the result. The reason why I'm showing you this is because I have a very few, very different cases in here. This one, for example, these are 7 meters high columns, which needed a very specific light. This is a very long 20 meters wall, which had all these paintings here, and also needed a very specific light. This is a little room that was built with all these little paintings on it and little sculptures, and you see the shadow here, you see the shadow here. It was very difficult to make the artist happy so that we illuminate everything evenly so everybody can see the sculptures in 3D, the paintings in 2D, but avoiding the shadow that goes down on the painting that's below. So for me, I have to admit, it was a very difficult job, but at the end everybody was happy. I'm just showing some galleries, and this is everything that I've shown you now is very much connected to the form of the light that I was talking about before. You've seen very different cases in very different occasions and very different requests. This is another artistic object that we were working on, where the source of the light was actually a video projection. This was done by the architect, a professor in Croatia. And, you know, we were discussing a lot about this, and we decided at the end that we're not going to use any lighting as usual to light up this space, but we will use a video image projected on this white screen that you see here, and that's how we will secure enough lighting for this space. This picture here is clearly showing what I was thinking at the very beginning of my presentation. So when I talk about the holistic approach towards anything that we want to illuminate, and we expand it to a much larger building or buildings or architectural expression, and then this is an example of that. We were hired to illuminate the entire old city of Buzet, which is on top of the hill, and this city is a you know, medieval, beautiful city, and it's mostly viewed from the far distance. So it was very important for us to consider that these buildings here are not lined up. They have, you know, some buildings are more in, some buildings are more pushed out. So in order for us to generate the clear vision of the viewer from very far of the third dimension and the movement of these buildings, was to use a different color temperature of the fixtures, not only their position, but different color temperature. And then in here you see we have a new town. So this is new, this is old. So we wanted to connect in some way these two different historical situations, where the new one has the usual yellow light on the streets, we all know, and the old one would look much better if we use just a white light. But we wanted to connect them together. And the space that's in between is the space that created the separation. So that's why how we managed to create this three-dimensional view from very far and also from near space. Because if we illuminated the entire place evenly with the same light, flooded with light, you will not be able to understand the depth and the difference here. And this is also one very nice example of that holistic approach, and that is, you see the castle here and the church, which is integrated, intervened within the little village that is also on top of the hill. And you know, I wanted to do something that is the opposite of what is the usual. The usually is that you flooded, you know, the historic heritage or that specific building with very strong, very powerful light, and you make it stand out. And then everybody else is no longer important. But why should it be like that? You know, we thought about the neighbors here. We thought about the people that live there. You know, everything around this place is important, not just that building. And when you view it from the other side, which is the only thing that you see, then we will give it importance. Actually, we don't have to give it any specific importance because it's already important by itself. So we just have to light it and everything is visible like that here. This is the occasion where we had, we've done this beautiful Parco della Luna in Recanati in Italy. And we also played here with different and various, you know, with shadow, enhancing the architectural detail and so on. But we mostly played with shadow here, and that's something I will show you later on. This is the Four Seasons Hotel in Baku that I was talking about before. And this is how the end result, you see, very usual, very seen before type of lighting that the customer at the end requested that we do, and we did it. This looks very similar. This is a red square in Moscow, but it's completely different. And the reason why it's different is because this technology that was used here is going to be presented next year, and it's very new technology and a very new approach in designing of lighting fixtures. It does not consider, as usual, wide flood beams or narrow beams and so on, but it considers a very specific optic that creates a very specific beam of light created specifically for this purpose here. So that is the fixture that actually replaces the long linear LED lights that we are used to use, and I hope that you will have a chance to see it in Frankfurt next year, which will also be presented by Iguzzini here. This example of a Roman arena, that it's an ongoing project right now, and it's also accepted by a protection ministry and so on, is where I took the opposite approach of the one that you've seen before on that big town, on that town that was on top of the hill. In here, I actually didn't want to show from the outside the volume and the form of this building. I just wanted to show the typical architectural detail which repeats itself so many times throughout the building on few levels that anyone who's looking at the building from the outside will clearly understand what that building is all about without actually showing just its volume. On the landscape lighting, we also have a very specific approach, and I call it, black canvas approach. The reason why is that when we are doing an interior space or we are illuminating any building, the light will reflect. It will reflect enough and it will influence everything that is in that room. In the exterior lighting is not the case. We don't have reflection in the exterior. It's a very little reflection, and the contrast is very strong. And it's like if you are painting with a white pencil on the black canvas. So in the landscape lighting case, I think that one word that sums up everything is balance. We have to balance the light in order to see the big picture. And how do we balance it? We have to approach and use rhythm, postures, poses, actually avoid visual noise. What does that mean? That means that through these little black graphs in here, you will see that if there is a balance, there is a clear distinction of the path. If there is no balance, there is no clear distinction of the path, and there is no clear distinction of where I'm going and what I'm seeing. Same here. So by using this approach of balancing the light in the visual perception, in the space that we see, it's very important that we talk about that balance. These are a few projects that we've done where you can clearly see that you don't see only the height of these trees here. It is another park in this five-star hotel resort and so on, where people actually, we were told that the people like to walk in that park at night quite often, and they go down to the beach, to the sea. So for them, it was important to feel secure. For them, it was important to find a way from the hotel through these woods, because this was far away from town. And we didn't want to just take the usual approach of feeling secure by having enough light. You know, we wanted to create something of a much better atmosphere here, and also for people to feel secure, to find their way, and to feel in some kind of beautifully illuminated space. This is the Parco della Luna that I was talking about before, for which we also won another award. And I have to say that this is the park where we actually didn't work with light, we actually worked with shadows. This is a very clear example of how we wanted to create, as much as that was possible, the effect of a very strong moonlight where that was possible, and create this effect. This is another project in which there was a landscaping and a facade lighting, and we also tried to hide all the visible fixtures as much as that was possible, so that you see the building, you see the tree, you see your pet, and this is what in this project was important. It wasn't important for you to see the pole, the globe, the lantern or something, but to see the actual architectural detail, landscaping, and the trees, and the color, and that. It's what we did. And this is an example of the rhythm. You see, the lighting was used here just to illuminate the existing body souls, and they are becoming a reflector. They became a reflector and gave enough light in this space for people to feel secure and walk. This is the design of a pole that we have done in this circle here, where we integrated all these various different optics and various different reflectors. We illuminated the trees and we illuminated the surrounding. This is the project that is ongoing right now also, where we were asked by the town municipality to not only to light up this roundabout here, but also to design something that will bring the attention to the visitors, because this is very intensely tourist town, and they have hundreds of thousands of tourists coming every year, and they wanted to do something different. So in order to do that, we analyzed all the historic details of that town, and we found out that if we look at the curve of the actual landscape of the town itself, if we look at the mesh that fishermen are using to catch the fish, then we look at the tree that is very typical for that area here, we came up actually with the conclusion that it's a curve that connects everything. So we designed a steel curve that became a container, that became actually a transporter of light, which will be very clearly visible at night and also during the day, and it will have a very unusual specific entrance in that town. And this is how it looks if you look at it as a whole. And in the middle, we designed this steel tree that it's not only just a sculpture, but it's also supporting the light fixtures that are giving us enough light for the traffic. We also naturally calculated, by norms, and the European norm EN 13201, everything is okay, and this is why we had to put these poles here. I would prefer not to, but that's where they are. So what I've shown you here is that in an urban lighting and landscape lighting in an urban setting, considering everything that I've said before about the holistic approach, about taking into account everything that surrounds the building and the place we're talking about, it's important that we try, as where that's possible, to make urban lighting master plans where we define everything, the norms, the solutions, and everything as one, where even if realization of such a project is very long, it takes sometimes many years, many times it doesn't really happen, at least we have something that it's like a Bible that everybody has to follow, and at the end we can talk about that holistic approach. This is a very also interesting project we just recently finished, where, you know, it's an example of using color temperature to distinguish different areas, different specific spaces in a given space. And that actually happened underground. It's a very big cave visited by, I think, I don't know how many thousands of people a year. And in order to do the right job, we actually used a 3D digital scanner to scan the cave in order to come up with the right project. Then we did a 3D simulation of how this light is going to look like, and this is what happened. This was before, and this is after. So we completely changed the approach, and as you can see here, there's a warm light, there's a cool light, the optics are very different, and the optic of light, the form of the light, the color of the light is following the form of the specific details in that cave, and the color temperature is also following what the color of the stone itself. Today, we have a very specific situation with the technology that we are bombarded with everywhere. And that is LED RGB. And I think in too many occasions, you know, it's overused. In too many occasions, as you can see on some pictures that I showed you before in urban setting, it is just a little too much, you know. But, you know, color and form of light is maybe the two most important elements for us to understand everything that surrounds us. So there are so many occasions where color will benefit the sense of space, where the color will benefit our feeling, and but there is also too many occasions where it's, you know, just overdone. Just showing you a few projects that where we used colors. You've seen others where we used colors. I think color can, in many occasions, distinguish a building from the rest of the buildings around. And, you know, sometimes, like in the case of this very famous shopping mall where the architecture is 150 years old, you know, we used, you know, a technique where we tried to reproduce the daylight, actually the position of the source where the daylight is actually coming through. And that is a very big 300-meter long cupola, glass cupola, and you have, it's flooded with light during the day, and then during the night, instead of having all the decorative fixtures around the wall here, which they have today, we said, you know, why don't we take that light and bring it through the cupola as it comes during the day? But because they have many different occasions for exhibitions there, for you know, festivities, and you know, it's a commercial building. So we decided that, you know, we can provide a very strong white light, but we can also make that light become, you know, colorful. So this is a simulation that we did, where you can clearly see how the entire space is changing according to the source, according to the color, and according to the need of that condition. So we have a condition, and the conditional logic allows us to create a different atmosphere in the same space whenever we want to do that. And this is the same building on the outside, which can also have this colorful scene at night. This project here is ongoing right now, and we expect to finish it by the end of March. And these are cranes of, in a town of Pula, which are operational. These cranes are actually being used every single day. The ships have been built there, and the shipyard is positioned practically in the middle of the town. And I had this idea about 15 years ago, but it took a long time, and it took private investors to come up with money so that we realized this project. And this project is now, you know, something that the community took very seriously, and they are planning to make, very different events around this. And this picture shows how big they are. You see, this is me here, and these are my guys during the testing session the other day. So these are 100-meter high cranes. And the idea is that we want that industrial archaeology, it's not archaeology yet, thank you God, but the industrial site becomes a nocturnal theater for a town. So that the tourist town, which is also an industrial town, have this nocturnal theater and become something completely different. If we want to do our job, we need tools. And the tool of the lighting designer is the source. Today, as Paolo touched the topic before, we have a problem because the tools are changing rapidly. But with these tools, the language of light is also changing rapidly, and the entire industry is going through a disruptive innovation. Because up until a year ago, we were talking about watts. Today, we're talking about lumens, and LEDs are taking over completely the market. But what we have to be careful about is that sometimes it's not what it's written in the book. And unfortunately, manufacturers of LED chips don't have a legal request from the government to clearly state, how long is this going to last? What is the exact color temperature of that? So they are writing all kinds of different things, and we have to believe what they are saying. The manufacturers of lighting fixtures are also in trouble because, in too many occasions, they really don't know what kind of chip is going to be installed in their fixture. And what happens? This is 2004. This is my house. And you see, these are LED fixtures. When I bought them and installed them in my house, they said that they're going to last for 200,000 hours. Well, this is July 2012. They almost not work anymore. So, what's going on here? Okay, manufacturers are pushing the product, consumer is buying, so it's an ongoing thing. But, is this sustainable? How sustainable that is for my pocket? Because that fixture doesn't exist anymore. That manufacturer, it doesn't produce that anymore. So what I have to do, in order to have that light, I have to take it out. I have to put another one in, but that other one is not the same fee anymore, so I have to break the facade. So I have to spend more money, much more money, to have this light working that I would spend if I had to replace that with the little Bispina, halogen light bulb. So, is this the way to sustainability? I don't know. We all talk about green, we talk about energy saving, but in my opinion, the green and energy saving is not, and it is, unfortunately, before the quality of life that I want. I'm asking myself, what about me? Where am I in this story? Why is it that I have to give up quality of light, actually quality of life, in my living room just because I'm going to save some money with energy saving? In 21st century, in 2013, where we have so much energy that is freely available, I think we should think about it a little bit, because who's going to take responsibility for that? So imagine a great city of Istanbul replacing all the existing lights with LEDs from unknown manufacturer because it's cheap. And this is what happens a lot, especially in smaller communities. They install it, and a year from now, 2 years from now, it just doesn't give enough light on that space, on that street, or it burned out. Who is responsible for that? Who's going to be responsible for spending public money? But let's say we forget about public money. It's me here who have to spend my own money, and that a lot of the money to replace those fixtures that I showed you before. So Are we greenwashed by greed? I don't know. Maybe we can discuss about that. So, lighting design beyond utilitarian is the topic of my presentation today. And I really like this by Marcel Proust. And, lighting design is something that we should design. When we use the word design, I had a great conversation with Demre last night about the word design. It's a little bit overused, I think, and I think we have to find a new one, especially for lighting design. And, the ingredients for good lighting designs are so many. There's so many things that we have to put in a pot. And, numbers, norms, specifications, communication, subjects, objects, all the people involved. At the end of all that, the difference between good lighting design and wow, if we can call it like that, is the magic ingredient, which is the creative, critical centimeter. And to explain that, I will show you what it means, 1 meter of architectural lighting design process. But it doesn't really apply only for lighting. It applies for every creative job. Every creative job has a process. So if we put that process in 1 meter and divide it into, the usual parts, which is a subject, that's an investor, architect, interior designer, all the project managers. The object, of course, this is what we are doing. Then we have the formality, the presentation, simulation, the drawings and technical. Then we have norms, regulation, calculation, all that stuff, realization, fixtures, so on. Somewhere in between all that is the creative, critical centimeter that makes the difference between good and wow. This is what I call it. So, we know what the magic ingredient is. We know how to cook lighting. This is our creative cook. You saw him before. This is our happy consumer, the lady that was very happy with his creation and the critical centimeter that he has. And now I will show you the office building which we designed and built in 2006. But during this presentation, I will tell you a little story. And that story is that this was the American lady who went to Positano in Italy in a beautiful restaurant and ordered pasta. And this pasta was so good and she loved it so much that he went and she begged the cook to tell her, and give her the recipe. So after all these negotiations, he actually gave her this recipe. She came back home to United States, and on a given day, on a Sunday, she invites her friends and family, all proud, saying, I will cook you the most fantastic pasta you ever ate in your life. So she goes to the market and she finds these fresh tomatoes and basil and all the ingredients that were necessary to do this great pasta that cook was writing for her. And she did it, invited everybody. Everybody ate it, but it wasn't good. So, American ladies, they're very persistent, they don't give up. She calls Positano, the cook, and says, hey, what happened? I did everything you want me to. I found the ingredients, I cooked it the time you told me to cook it, the pasta was, homemade, and tomatoes were homemade, and everything was great, and it just wasn't that. So he said, of course, because you forgot the most important ingredient. She says, what is it? He says, it's your heart. So if you don't put your heart into it, it's never gonna come out right. So this building that you see here is something where I put my heart into. This is where we cook lighting design projects, me and my team. This building was, designed in 2005, built in 2006. We work here, every day. There's 15 people, my colleagues, that we work on. And everything around this building is actually built around light. We have so many integrated lighting systems in here that do all kinds of different things that we need. We have designed all the furniture, all the ceilings, everything that you see in this space. And everything that was done there, it was done for me and for us who live in that building to feel good working, to feel that we have a decent quality of life during the day where we spend most of our lives, at least I do. And you know, this was awarded so many times by architectural societies, by lighting society, and so on. And I think that you know, it's not because it's, you know, building that I designed or that I'm working in. I think that all the visitors that come in are also realize and understand that having this very clean space where integration was the key word for the lighting, where total design was very much present in everything that you can find here, also brings, as I said before, a very big quality of life for the people that live in. We didn't consider at the very beginning the energy saving. We first considered the quality of life. And then the energy saving came, and that's why we have the quality of life and we also save the energy. Thank you very much.
Wow. I'm very impressed. There's like 700 people. None of them left for an hour of presentation. Congratulations. It was a great and inspirational one. Except the Italian ambassador, but you know, it could happen. Great presentation. Thank you very much. I will ask the first question. There could be some questions. I will ask the first one, and then if someone would like to ask another, then we can go on. From what we have seen so far in many projects, you had the chance to actually affect how the architecture will end up, which is not the case in many countries, especially in Turkey, when lighting can, you know, come up to the mind when there's no budget and when there's no time. So what is the best timing for a lighting designer to be included in the project? Also, a question related to that is that, do you have a limit where you don't accept a work when, you know, it comes to a certain point?
Well, lighting designer should be involved in every project from napkin stage, you know. So when you sit in a restaurant and start envisioning the building, that's when lighting designers should be already involved. I think that I showed a little graph there, and I was talking about the cooperation and need of cooperation between architects and interior designers as a team. And that's when all the good projects come out. Because, you know, I can be a cook for lighting, but, you know, you are cooking architecture, somebody else is cooking the interior, so we all have to mix that soup together in order for it to have a good taste. And I think that I understand very much your question. I think it's a matter of, sometimes it's a matter of culture, sometimes it's a matter of money, but I think that architects today, in general, and everyone who is creatively involved in any building should take over the power over the investors. It sounds difficult, I know, but I think that our job is very much undermined by those who have money. And you know, so many good things can come out if we take over in the decisions. And also very good for investor himself. And that doesn't mean that he has to spend more money, you know. Because when you know, do things like this, it's not necessarily more money. You know, people think that when you do something that is unusual, that it costs I don't know what, but that's not true. You know, because calculating the financial aspect of a building should never be just the early stage and the building stage. You know, the long run is also something that comes out of the pocket of the investor. The maintenance, the sustainability and so on, and of course the quality of life that I was talking about. So this is all important, and I think that as somebody is envisioning the object and putting the first sketches on the paper, you know, that's when the process of everything starts. Not only lighting, but everything else. So.
Thank you. Başka soru var mı? Teşekkürler geldiğiniz için. Ufak bir ikramımız olacak. Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Yeni etkinliklerde görüşmek üzere. İyi akşamlar. Thank you very much. Sorry. Pardon. Bir soru varmış. Görmedim. Çok uzun sürede baktım ama şurada.
First of all, thank you very much for the great presentation. My question would be, as you said, light not only enables us to see, but also has effects on our biological system, and it regulates our, for example, body temperature,
yes,
heart rate, or sleep-wake cycle, even our brain activities. So how would you comment on this issue? I think I haven't seen much emphasis on these issues during your presentation. So where does this fit in your holistic approach?
Yeah.
Is lighting industry not ready for integrating these issues as well?
Thank you for that question. The reason why I didn't want to touch that topic is because today in the lighting industry and the people who are dealing with lighting, in English we would say it's a given. You know, we all know that there is so many scientific proofs, medical, biological, and so on, how the light influences the human beings. And that is not something that we should, you know, really, you know, discuss in a group like this, because I think, you know, with architects, we have to, you know, they're more like talking about form and so on. But the lighting designer, of course, knows that. You know, it is like, you know, a surgeon, you know, who performs a heart surgery, he knows that there are veins and blood and everything in it, so it's a given, you know, and that is why I didn't really go into a specific of the scientific, you know, issues and topics of the influence of light on human beings, because we really know that very much. I mean, there's so many proof. We can, you know, heal people with light today, and you know, that's why I.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Çok teşekkürler. İyi akşamlar.